I'm Josh Fenton, CEO and co-founder, and today Governor Dan McKee joins us live. Governor, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, Josh, thanks for the invitation.
Okay, let's jump to it. Listen, you have been really carving out a place as the, quote, education governor. You are in it up to your eyeballs. You've launched a program called Learn 365 RI. It's an initiative to really ramp up the amount of learning that goes on in the state. Talk a little bit about an overview and where we are right now in that initiative.
Well, GoLocal, Josh, and thank you for that. It was really the first on board to kind of lay out what we were doing in April. A lot has happened since April. I had mentioned about going out with compacts to municipalities. Mayor's Eye and down in Newport was the first to sign that. Since then, 31 communities have signed on to the compact, which says that we're going to meet or exceed Massachusetts levels by 2030. We're going to increase attendance in all our schools, and we're going to increase our FAFSA applications. About 3 mainstays of those compacts. 31 communities representing over 93% of the state of Rhode Island, and I'm going to each and every one to physically sign those compacts. And then what's happened since then as well, which was we've appropriated $4 million for programming into the compact communities. That time frame to apply for that has ended, and we're going to be starting to announce those awards in the next several days. So, but the big news for me is, how important learning centers have been to me in our whole conversation since I got into office. We were able to get approval from the White House and the Treasury and the General Assembly over the last few months, but immediately this week, last week, we got approval for $80+ million that is going to go to the compact communities to build learning centers around the state of Rhode Island in all these communities that want them, that'll focus on learning, jobs, and health for a 5-year time frame. So now you've started the program, now you got investment in, you got communities on board, and we can fill in some of the details during this conversation about how we're already layering in that extra 1 million hours of learning time that we are going to be working on over the next several years annually to make sure that we're doing everything we can to help our young people reach that potential.
Governor, this week, Wallet Hub came out with a study, and some of their studies are quite good, some of them are less so, but they ranked Rhode Island as a high expense for educational cost and a low performance state. Rhode Island came in not in the top half of the states in the country, came in 26th and the last in New England. That's obviously not a ranking we want. It took us a long time to get there. Is this type of initiative of adding 1 million hours of learning enough to push us, catch up from some of that COVID lack of learning to be able to be a high-performing state?
Yeah, so the learning recovery as well as the mental health recovery is real. We know that the capacity of schools to address that inside of their school day is not very likely, and not because of effort, but because of time. So when you add this extra time in, like you said, right, and we bring the municipality leadership in, and we build the teams that are bought in. I just left Newport at CCRI, so you have Mayor's Eye, you have CCRI, Salva Regina, Boys and Girls Club, you got the Bank Newport, all on board to make this happen. And if we duplicate that in every one of these communities and create this culture that learning is a priority in every household in the state, that's our next step into this effort. Yes, the answer is yes. We fully understand when I was doing mayoral academies, actually Rhode Island was in the bottom 5 of the schools who were compared to cost and outcomes. There has been improvement. We got a long way to go to be the best in the country. But if we meet or exceed Massachusetts levels by 2030, and I believe we can get there through efforts like this, and also having formats like this that we can let people know. You're going to tell thousands of people today about this effort, and we want to connect in with every household in the state of Rhode Island. If we're able to do that, I'm very confident that not only will we raise our outcomes in our public schools, but in general, we'll raise it across every household, whether young kids are in charters or private schools, or parochial schools, or homeschool. We're working with every single family through the municipal leaders. And when we do that, Josh, you're going to get results. And I believe that you're already starting to see it in many ways. The collaboration that's happening. I was in Providence schools yesterday. I know you had a photo on your
Yep.
site of me working, asking the Commissioner Infante Green and Superintendent Montanez to do something this summer in advance of the efforts that we're starting to put in with the municipal leaders. 2,100 kids are in learning programs that weren't in learning programs last year at this time in the city of Providence. 1,200 kids in the elementary schools, and in the middle schools and high school, 900 young kids.
That's
And
great.
I saw them in action yesterday in more than one school. So yes, can you affect the change inside of the the district school, this traditional public school, by working outside of those areas in the work that we're doing right now? I think if you're intentional about it and you're really working it every day like we are right now, and we're going to continue doing that out of my office, our higher ed's commissioners connecting higher ed into this mix, the Commissioner Infante Green connecting in our K through 12, our pre-K through 12 programs. By coordinating like that, and in our business community, I know that you're going to participate in a way in an essay contest that's coming up.
Yep.
Didn't even mention the nonprofit that we've set up that now is organized as we have enough dollars to operate during the first year by creating personnel that's going to be able to provide professional guidance to all these municipal leaders. If you tie it all together, you're going to get outcomes, and it's a function of time.
Governor, talk a little bit, let's jump off education, jump over to, unfortunately, an ethics violation complaint has been filed. The Ethics Commission is moving forward with an investigation. It is, the backdrop is a luncheon at the Capitol Grill. No, we're not invited to that luncheon. And who picked up the tab is the center of this. Did you receive a benefit? Did you not receive a benefit? Give us a little overview of that, and what's the issue there?
Well, we'll let the commission do its work. I think that the public knows this is a political attack by the Republican Party in a way that, quite frankly, is very, it's not very, very productive. So we'll let the commission do its work. It was a campaign event that was my expectation there'd be multiple people there. There was not multiple people. It was a private lunch. And then when I left the lunch, my expectation was that the person that was representing our campaign was going to pay the bill, and the transaction, as was been reported, was supposed to happen after the fact. It didn't happen. So we'll let the Ethics Commission do its work there. But clearly, those who want to make a big issue out of this are making a mountain out of a molehill, especially in retrospect to the things we just talked about, education. We'll talk about offshore wind. We're going to talk about the Armory. Those are the important things that people want to hear about, and the public understands that this is a political attack.
Governor, let's jump over to, we've got a kind of bizarre situation in our regulatory structure. There's an effort to make Rhode Island, Governor Raimondo, Governor Carcieri, it started obviously with Governor Carcieri, continued through Raimondo into your administration, of really making Rhode Island the hub for offshore wind. We were first in the water with the Deepwater project off Block Island. Since then, we have not added another windmill through the Raimondo administration into yours. A major, major proposal for nearly 1,000 megawatt project proposed by Ørsted and Eversource went before first, seems a strange order, Rhode Island Energy, which is a subsidiary of PPL down in Pennsylvania. So not really a Rhode Island company, but a subsidiary of a Pennsylvania company. And they rejected that bid unilaterally, thus either requiring it to be rebid or the end of that project. Can't get to the 2033 deadlines of being a renewable energy independent on our electricity production without these mega projects. How do we fix this? How do we get this back on track? And how do we build this offshore wind industry that I think everybody can see the potential for here in Rhode Island and not see it go to Massachusetts and New York and Maryland, where they are making a little bit more headway?
Well, I think the first thing to realize is that you got to fill this pipeline, and it takes years for to realize the project to actually operating. We're seeing that right now, right, with the Revolution Wind that has been approved. We are moving forward on that. We should have turbines, in construction and not operating by the end of 2025. That took about 7 years, Josh. So
right.
Time is a factor here. So and that was actually a collaboration between us and Massachusetts. And during that time frame, it didn't stop Provport from creating these manufacturing facilities that are creating support for the offshore wind up the East Coast, including a number of the things that are happening in New York. We're manufacturing those the turbines here in Rhode Island, right at Provport. So we're in the mix. That's the reason that we had Secretary Granholm here. She knows that we're in the mix in relative to this issue. Specifically on the procurement that I asked and the General Assembly approved, that just was addressed by the Rhode Island Energy. We're not done with that, right? We're going to continue to pursue ways to potentially lower that cost. The problem is that on the project that is being built right now with Revolution Wind, the Revolution Wind 1, that was a kilowatt cost of 9.8 cents over 20 years. We can manage that rate. The rate that was discussed relative to this past proposal was closer to 15 cents in the 16-cent range, I believe. We need to lower that. So, right. And we need to do everything we can to do that. So we're not going to, at all costs, just jump into the water, so to speak, right? On any rate, we need to work to make sure that the rates are comparable in ways that we can be competitive. I think that was the initial reaction from Rhode Island Energy. If we can figure out ways to lower rates, even on the existing bid, and we can revisit that, we will. If we need to go regional in a strategy as being discussed right now as an option to work with, we got to make sure that rates are in line with us so that we can, be competitive. So we're not done. I think that we're showing an incredible amount, like you mentioned, the 2033 timeline and the 2030 timeline on the Act on Climate. We're supporting the Act on Climate with investing in heat pump program, $25 million heat pump program that's going to come within the next a few weeks. And in addition to that, you know that I have been fighting rates and making sure that the utility company is held accountable for capital gains that they were going to receive in the amount of almost $40 million that they were going to put in the ratepayers' pocket, that we made sure that went back to the ratepayers in the form of a rate relief.
Yeah, Governor, let's talk about that for a second, because as Lieutenant Governor, you were the most activist Lieutenant Governor maybe in the country on fighting against rate increases. Last year, Rhode Island Energy filed for almost a 50% rate increase. They ended up with a 46% for residential electricity. They just announced yesterday they're filing for another 24% increase. So we've got these stacking up rate increases, which are driving inflation. On the flip side is we're seeing across the country and across the globe, whether it's fires in Greece or heating up water down in the Florida Keys, extreme heat in the Southwest. Do we have to suck it up on the cost and push towards renewables at a much heavier pace? We're getting killed on rate increases anyways, which are topsy-turvy on our economy and inflation. What's the pathway to be able to balance these wildly competing and fluctuating interests?
The rate increases that came, Rhode Island Energy, not that we have to defend them, that was all in the pipeline before they showed up. That has to do with procuring the energy to actually fire up the plants so that then the electricity can be delivered.
And we're so dependent on natural gas here in Rhode Island. More than 85% of our electricity is fueled by natural gas coming in through functionally a single pipeline.
Absolutely, and so we're going to have to we are moving away from fossil fuels, whether it's in our efforts in terms of electric vehicles, charging stations. All those things are going on. Millions of dollars are being invested right as we speak on that part of it. The utility side, Josh, is a problem because we don't have the capacity that we need in terms of the natural gas, and we are in a position where we want to move on the renewables, and we will, and the Biden administration is supporting that. We're going to need, just like the fossil fuel industry did, we're going to need subsidies, just like we subsidize fossil fuels. We now are the ocean state. We are going to bring in a great deal of energy on the wind and other renewable strategies. We need the support from the Biden administration and from Washington, the same way that they supported Texas or South Dakota or Pennsylvania on the fossil fuels. We're moving away from the fossil fuels,
right.
and we're going to do it aggressively. And we think that Rhode Island is in a key spot to do that. But we got to figure out ways, especially you got the Federal Reserve talking about another interest rate hike tomorrow. What are they thinking? What do we need to do to impress on them? Which, by the way, some of that cost, we don't know exactly how much of that cost in that last procurement has to do with interest rates.
Right.
We know it had an impact. We're going to have to find options, whether it's in this current bid that is still somewhat on the table in my mind, or in future, collaboration, whether it's regional or whether it's independent. They're going to have to deal with the rate of the interest. They're going to have to figure out ways to buy down that interest rate on the federal level if, in fact, they want to get this 30 megawatts of energy offshore wind by 2030, which they have established, in the Biden administration. That gives me confidence that Rhode Island's going to play a role in establishing this offshore wind, because the Biden administration is going to need to support Rhode Island and other states like Rhode Island that can provide this offshore wind to meet the timetable that the Biden administration has set.
Governor, let's jump over to the Armory. The Armory is one of the architectural marvels, the Cranston Street Armory, the yellow brick, majestic castle has been sitting there for vacant, I can't remember, 20 years, 25 years, something like that, since the National Guard left that facility. There's been proposals. If we had $1 for every proposal for that, revamping that facility, we'd all be wealthy. Where are we now, and how do we change it from being like a project like the Masonic building at the base of the State House that was vacant for 75 years and then miraculously turned into a spectacular hotel, the Renaissance, a gleaming redevelopment project? Why does it take us so long in Rhode Island to be able to take a great building like that and revamp it into a new reuse, either as residential or some other benefit for the community?
Well, first of all, on the project that was at hand, and the reason that we've moved away from the proposal is because it was just too big of a risk for the taxpayers, right? So, estimated $60 million of construction cost that we're hearing that could have even been at least 50% higher with no cap for the taxpayer, Josh. So, and then operational cost, being on the negative side of the operational costs absorbed all by the state on that proposal. And in addition to that, we had talked about taking 30,000 square feet of that building, take the cost of the retrofit that the state would have, and then put a state office space in there and pay a rent that was $750,000 to $1 million a year.
Right.
That is just too high of a risk. So to answer your question, you need to put it into a project strategy where the taxpayers are not at risk. And there are projects, like you said, the Renaissance is a private operation. I don't believe the state has any risk in that any longer. And that's where you got to come to terms. You got to come to that point. That project, if I approved that project the way that it was presented, it would have been a very bad decision on my part. And to have the exposure for the taxpayers that had no limits, to me was just a bad bad agreement and a bad deal. Now,
That deal, just for clarification, that deal had been negotiated by the Raimondo administration with the Pennsylvania-based Scout company that had done some interesting redevelopment projects down in the Philadelphia area, but that project was negotiated by them preceding your taking over the governorship, correct?
Yes, to some degree, but we participated after we tried to make it happen in a way. But if you look at the timeline of when I'm starting to say, oh my God, I'm not sure that we're heading in the right direction. January came and we didn't put anything in the budget because I didn't feel as comfortable to say, oh, we should put X amount of dollars in the budget and start to, put us in a spot where we were going to just continually have to chase it with more money and more money. So we participated in a certain degree. When it got to, but you're right, Scout was there before we came in, and the project scope of the project was defined before we came in, and then we tried to make it work, Josh. And it,
yeah.
And it
Are
just
you
was.
going to rebid this project out, try and get some new thinking, some new financial structures? What's the future of that building?
So I think that all options are open right now. As we've been public about, I have sat down with Mayor Smiley because I see this as a community project more than a state project, and they have multiple owners on this too, which complicates it, Josh. The state owns the building and the footprint that the building's on, but the city owns the parking and the park next to it. You need one owner to make this happen, and at this point in time, we're going to try our best to create a strategy where we facilitate some cash into the agreement, but see whether the city of Providence can kind of steer this thing, and we will provide some resources to help make that happen. If we can't come to that conclusion, I mean, in the report, and I'm certainly not top priority, but you take the building down and you create a new footprint there that is an advantage to the neighborhood. If you can't find a use that the taxpayers can afford, then you got to look at all options. But we could go out for an RFP, but I think that we're holding off on that until we, conversations with the city of Providence have concluded. But like you mentioned, housing, hey, we got money on the life science right now, $45 million. I think that we'll, continue to be investing in that. So there's areas where we're investing in the city. In ways we're building a new health lab in the city. There's no reason that, a building like that, if in fact it made sense, dollars and cents wise, and that's what you got to do, Josh. You can't just say, oh, this is a great idea, and then put, and not even understand what it is. I think that the neighborhood really wants something to happen there. I understand their disappointment, but they weren't looking at the dollars and cents of this, and I did, and I was, and so. The way it was presented, the risks were way too high, the construction costs were limitless, as well as the operational cost, and then the state had to become a tenant just to make the numbers work, and they didn't even work, even after the state was going to become a tenant in its own building and pay rent, and then the management fee was extraordinarily high relative to the market. So there was just too many factors in that it was not in the best interest of the taxpayers. I made that decision. I believe it was a good decision, and now we're kind of trying to figure out the next steps. Next steps is the city of Providence. We are unable to work out something that makes sense there, then we'll go to an RFP process.
One follow-up. Do you anticipate Scout, the Pennsylvania-based company, taking legal action based on your canceling that contract?
They may, but I believe it'll be groundless. We've done our work. We know that where we stand right now. I know that the last transaction happened. The invoice is for the last month, which is August. We paid that. We believe that we've held up our interest in terms of our responsibilities, but it doesn't stop Scout. If Providence does something, they might be able to work out some sort of management with them. That would be up to the Mayor Smiley if in fact we get in that direction. But they may very well do that. I hope they don't. I think that, we've done everything we can to try to make that work. And like I said, I think anybody who looks at the numbers will say the risk was just too high for the return.
Governor, last question. Your Lieutenant Governor, Sabina Matos, had a rough week last week. I think many people judged her Friday night press conference as a very difficult press conference, maybe one of the more least high-performing press conferences in recent political history. Where are you with her? Have you endorsed her for Congress? Do you see yourself endorsing her? What's the future of that campaign and your involvement in it?
Well, first, I know that, like you said, it was a difficult situation. You've got, at the heart of democracy is the process of elections. I'll let the authorities, whether it's the Board of Elections or Secretary of State or our state police or the Attorney General, deal with the ramifications of that. I would say, though, the backdrop of that is that enough signatures were, just like every other candidate, the Lieutenant Governor is as qualified as any candidate to be on the ballot. They had, those are all been verified. So let the voters decide what's going to happen there. I'm taking a position where I'm waiting. I do not plan to make an endorsement in that election. Let the voters decide on that. But that doesn't mean that I don't think that there's good candidates, qualified candidates that are running there in addition to the Lieutenant Governor. But we'll let the voters decide on that. I'm not in a position right now where I'm going to endorse any one candidate.
Governor, you get the last word. I appreciate you taking all the time. What should Rhode Islanders be looking for out of the McKee administration in the next few weeks?
I think that we're going to continue to focus on our three main priorities, which is one, raising academic outcomes for all our families in the state. Two, raising incomes for all our families in the state. And stay tuned on that, because I expect to have another strategy in place in a short distant future, similar to what we did on the compacts on the education, with compacts with municipalities about raising incomes in their individual communities. And third has to do with raising health and fitness levels in the state of Rhode Island. And it's not a mistake, or it's not a coincidence that the $80 million that we just got approved to create learning centers around the state of Rhode Island need to focus on learning, jobs, and health. And the communities that are signing the compacts, they're going to receive a proportionate share of those dollars to help them build those centers. We're going to provide them the guidance to do that. And the really upside there is that we're going to measure the outcomes, Josh, of what we're setting, right? And there'll be a 5-year commitment for the communities that engage in these federal dollars to help build these facilities. So I would ask the people in the state of Rhode Island to really be focusing on the work that we're doing to reach and attain those objectives. We need their help, whether we're supporting small businesses in the way that we have, or whether we're supporting the economy or the education. We want to raise incomes in the state of Rhode Island. We want to hear from people in the state about how we can do that.
Governor McKee, I greatly appreciate you taking the time. Enjoy this tremendous weather. Obviously, your office just issued some guidance on the heat advisory and for Rhode Islanders to protect themselves. We'll be publishing that. We'll have much more on GoLocal throughout the day and into the night. And stay tuned for much, much more. Everybody enjoy this weather.